All right, guys, I got my friend Saif Islam with me here to talk about HRV today. I'm pumped. I think Saif's pumped. Saif, how you doing?
Doing very well, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm geeked out. I'm ready to share to the world what heart rate variability is and why it's so rad. I think it's great. I think it can help everybody, especially somebody who's looking to boost their performance in whatever they're doing.
Fully agree. I think it's really cool. I think a few years ago, if someone told me I'd be on a podcast talking about HRV, I wouldn't have believed them. So I'm excited to geek out a little bit here with you.
Yeah. So, Saif, I mean, you're the expert in the world of HRV recovery. You work for Whoop, a wearable company who really has brought being able to self-quantify HRV from a wearable standpoint to the market. And I was introduced to your company while I was playing in the NFL, and it's been phenomenal. I've used it as not only a tool for fitness, but just as a everyday tool for performance. Getting into podcasting, it's amazing when I look at my HRV and recovery score and the mental acuity I have when hearing somebody asking questions and being sharp. It's awesome. So diving into it, what is HRV for the listener out there who has never heard of this?
Yeah, so HRV stands for heart rate variability. It's actually the kind of fundamental metric upon which we've built all the technology at Whoop. We think it's probably the metric over the next coming years that not just athletes, but sort of regular folks are really going to start to pay attention to. Getting into what it is, so it's actually the variability in timing between different beats of your heart. So if you have a 60 beat per minute heart rate, for example, that doesn't actually mean that your heart is beating on the second every second. Your heart might beat at 1.2 seconds, 0.8, 1.1, 0.9. And it's that variability in heart rate that HRV tracks. Now, without getting into too much detail immediately, HRV manifests itself in the heart rate, but it's actually a function of your nervous system. So your nervous system is made up of two different branches, this parasympathetic branch and the sympathetic branch. One is an activating branch where your heart rate's going up, your perspiration's going up, your blood pressure's going up. Think of anything you're doing in the day that's causing that, from digesting food to exercising to accumulating stress. The other branch is your parasympathetic branch. Think heart rate down, blood pressure down, perspiration down. And those two branches are constantly sending different signals to your heart. And you actually want both of those to be sending signals powerfully at the same time. And it's those competing signals that will boost your HRV. So your HRV really is a good lens into how well you're eating. Are you well hydrated? Are you overstressed? Are you exercising well? And as I said, again, it manifests itself in the heart rate, but it really is a lens into your nervous system.
Awesome. So you really are looking for a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and that's what gives you a more beneficial readout. So I know a lot of people are most likely stuck in that sympathetic, fight or flight response where their, daily stress has accumulated and they have a hard time, figuring out why their energy's zapped, why they're feeling overwhelmed, all that good stuff. But what about on the flip side of the coin? Like, what if I had no stress and I was just a couch potato and just not a care in the world, and I was just parasympathetic all the time? Would that affect the score?
Yeah, so there are a couple of interesting cases. There is one pretty rare scenario where you would have something called parasympathetic saturation. That's when your parasympathetic branch is kind of dominating. We tend to see that typically in sort of elite endurance athletes that are going through a period of tapering. But at the same time, for a regular person, if you're sort of just sitting around the whole time, your HRV will actually sometimes be increasing, just because it tends to be the case that your sympathetic or your activating branch dominates. For those folks, that might not be the case. That's not necessarily a good thing, which is why it's important then to place your HRV in some context, depending on what you're doing every day. As an athlete, you should expect a pretty variable HRV day to day, depending on what you're doing. The same thing as an individual person, depending on how your day is going. You sitting around all day, it's not going to have a benefit to you, even if you do see your HRV ticking up.
And what are some of the things that like crush an HRV reading, that like absolutely destroy it?
Yeah, so it'll probably be unfortunate for your listeners to hear, but number one culprit is definitely alcohol intake. You can think again, when you consume alcohol, a ton of resources are going to process that alcohol in your liver, which is just tanking your HRV score. Others would be sort of if you do kind of a super big workout one day, you can sometimes see that show up in your HRV the following day. Lack of hydration, poor nutrition, and then I would also say, at least for me personally and for many of our Whoop users, we see poor sleep show up in a low HRV score. That's both if people are underslept in the number of hours, or also something that we call sleep consistency. If people are sleeping at pretty erratic times, waking up at erratic times, that throws your circadian rhythm off whack, and you'd see a decline in your HRV.
So I've noticed, so I have a Whoop. I've been wearing my Whoop for a few years now. So I've been able to experiment a bit and see what affects my readouts. And it looks like there's kind of a threshold for alcohol, and you can really see it wreak havoc. At least I see it wreak havoc when it gets close to bedtime and there's alcohol consumption, and when I have more than 2 drinks. One of the cool things about the Whoop app that I like is there's the journal associated with your recovery every day. You can pop in, answer a couple questions that go along with your score. So that way you can look back and kind of keep track on the behaviors, your habits, what you've done that has carried over into the score. And one of those things is alcohol consumption. And I quite often click yes, because I enjoy a glass of wine or dinner. You know, I'm big into the health and fitness world and all about wellness. And, you know, I think that there is a place to have a well-constructed drink that can, you know, do some things for your health that are productive and not counterproductive. I know it's a very slippery slope for a lot of people because, you know, you have 2 drinks and man, a third sounds really good because you get that big response from the alcohol, and you know, it becomes a slippery slope. But when you can see what that does when you go over that 2 drink threshold and see what it does to your heart rate variability the next day, it's really a good coach to say, hey, you know, just stop after 2 drinks. Or, you know, maybe you're not going to have a drink today because it's too close to bedtime and you got to be sharp for training, got to be sharp for your meeting tomorrow, whatever it is, you want to be at your best. So you just kind of pause a drink for that day, maybe carry it into the next.
Right. Yeah, I think there are 2 really good points you touch on there. One is this idea of just giving you data without judging. So I think that's been a big focus for us here at Whoop is our CEO likes to use a term, you can only manage what you measure. And sounds like for you that 2 drink threshold is kind of the tipping point. We see other folks that can go 4, 5, 6 drinks deep and they're still doing all right the next day. And other folks, if they have 1 glass of white wine a couple of hours before bed, that's going to tank their HRV score. But really getting to see the personal impacts of the decisions you are making, I think that's been one of the really powerful elements for our Whoop community. And I think the second piece here is, again, just entering a mode where you can test and see what works for you, not just with alcohol, but with other lifestyle choices as well. For me, diet's always been an interesting one where some people will swear by intermittent fasting. Other folks will want to go into paleo or vegan, and people sort of laud different diets. I think what's cool again is you can sort of test this stuff on yourself, right, and really see what is the impact on my HRV score, what is the impact on my heart rate, on different key metrics that are a good lens into whether or not this lifestyle choice is working out for me or not.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, HRV is like by far my favorite self-quantification tool because, you know, it's something that you can't really see unless there's that reading every day and you can kind of keep track of it. That makes Whoop different is it has the HRV built into the device and built into the algorithm. Or I guess I should say Whoop has heart rate variability readings incorporated into its algorithm. Why do you feel other wearable companies kind of emit HRV, and why is it so important to Whoop and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so I think probably the main argument is just accessibility. If you think about the evolution of the wearable space, it's really started with folks wanting to track things that they can understand on day one. That was kind of why steps became something very popular for the Fitbits, Apple Watches, etc. of the world. I think for us at Whoop, we've taken a slightly different approach and said, even if the time to education is a little bit longer, the lead time is a little bit longer, we want to invest in technology that is cutting edge and is actually giving you personalized insights into your data. And for us, HRV has been something that 8 years ago, we built the technology with that in mind when no one was really talking about it. It's, I think, why our initial market was professional athletes like yourself that really are investing the time in understanding their bodies because it's having a big impact on their careers. But I think what we've started to see now is as folks evolve and people become more interested in biometric data, HRV is going to just continue to evolve. And for us, that's obviously really excited at Whoop. As you mentioned, we've actually built out a patent that measures HRV during your deepest stage of sleep, because HRV is actually, I think this gets to my second point, a very complicated metric to measure accurately. It also varies a ton through the day. So if you just show someone their HRV through the course of 24 hours in a day, it's not a very helpful metric. It can actually be very confusing. What we've done at Whoop is we measure it at a very consistent time when it's almost impossible for you to impact it by, for example, drinking a glass of water or breathing more slowly. What that does, it gives you a really strong baseline upon which to act. So yeah, I would say a combination of just the difficulty to measure it accurately, along with the fact that it hasn't been the most quote unquote accessible metric to date. And hopefully we at Whoop are sort of working to fix that.
Yeah, I remember being in an NFL locker room when we were starting to use HRV, and this was before I was using Whoop, and we were given a polar heart rate strap. And, you know, first thing when we got to the facility, it's like, hey, sit down, put the strap on, open this app in your phone, sit there for a minute, and that'll take the reading. And there was just so many things about that were problematic. One of the things was the fact that there's so many different variables that come into play before you chair at your locker. There's also the fact that there's also the fact that guys are coming in, they have things to do, and sitting down and putting a heart rate strap on, launching an app, making sure it's connected to the strap, and all while doing that, staying totally even keel and, you know, not working up a sweat or not about other stuff, and sitting there and taking a reading was just a hard thing to do. I just think that there was a much better way. It was hard to, you know, see good involvement with that kind of program in the locker room. I was always buddies with the sports science guys and the teams. So it was always fun chatting with them on, you know, the participation they were getting. And it was tough to get consistent participation that way. So then when the Whoop came along and it's taking the HRV during my deep sleep every night, I don't have to think about it. I wake up and I get that score, and that to me had so much value in it.
Right, and that's sort of the transition we're looking to make. And you're speaking as an athlete that probably invested a ton of time thinking about these metrics. But for that average Joe that is getting up and going through the daily grind every day and looking to perform better in their work in life, they don't want data every single second of the day that they have to interpret themselves. They want to be told what this data actually means. So for us, that's been a big focus at Whoop is tracking a ton of data for you, but then trying to obviously distill it down to what are the one or two baseline metrics that you should be looking at.
Yeah. And that's awesome. Like, you know, if I'm kind of showing a friend the app or trying to explain it to somebody, you know, who's just got a strap and they're starting to get familiar with their HRV, Whoop does a great job, in my opinion, of breaking it down extremely simple, of being able to not even look at the numbers, but just look at the color of your recovery. You know, you get a percentage and you get numbers and you can dive as deep as you want into the science. But, you know, if all you want to do is look at how I should proceed through my day, look at your recovery score. Was it green? Was it yellow? Was it red? Like, to me, that's so intuitive. It's so easy. If it's green, I'm cutting it loose. I'm probably pushing myself a little bit for my workout. If it's yellow, I'm cruising through my day as usual, not going to really change anything. And if it's red, I'm going to take a good hard look at if I really need to work out and what kind of workout I'm going to get. And is it going to be restorative, and get that score back into the yellow, back into the green for the next day.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when you couple that with the journal that's allowing you to track, did I drink caffeine that day? Did I wear earplugs to bed? All those types of things. Then you just as an individual will start to figure out what are the 2 or 3 things that work for me very practically and are getting me in that yellow green as opposed to that red.
Yeah. And it's nice. The journal's nice because you can turn off things that, just don't apply to your habits and your lifestyle. And you can insert things that you sometimes do and sometimes don't do. And if you want to see if that has an effect on what you're doing. And, if the person wants to journal nothing, they can journal nothing. It's just another way to, see what they're doing show up in the results that they're getting. And that's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I'm curious actually from your end what you've found helpful from a journaling standpoint. If you wouldn't mind sharing like a couple of things.
Yeah. So things that have helped me a lot. Number one is sleeping cold. Like sleeping hot is my number one killer of recovery. Number one killer of HRV.
What are you like 65 Fahrenheit kind of cold?
Yeah. So it's hard for me to set the thermostat to 65 being of Dutch descent, and we're sometimes. So, I try to set it as low as possible. Yeah. I usually stay at 68. The last 2 nights I've got real crazy and gone 67.
Nice.
But I sleep with a chili pad, which is a mattress pad that has some small coils or capillaries in it and then pumps cold water through. And that's been awesome. I notice when I don't sleep with that, my scores are a little worse because I'm sleeping warmer, and my resting heart rate in particular, which is another metric that Whoop uses, is significantly higher whenever I sleep hot. Sometimes my HRV will still be okay when I sleep warm, but that that resting heart rate is definitely going to be through the roof when I sleep hot. Back to the cold, we were actually at my parents' cottage 3 nights ago and had the windows open, and it was just after a cold front went through, and this is up in northern Michigan, and it got we had the fan in the window pumping cold air into the bedroom. And it was, one of those nights where it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is so cold. Like, I felt like I had woken up a few times just being so freezing cold. And then I wake up in the morning, my resting heart rate readout was incredible. It was like a 39. And my HRV was through the roof, and my recovery score was great. And I really didn't have as many disruptions as I thought in my sleep. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. That means I guess you just got to start sleeping outdoors more, unfortunately.
I know. My body needs that cold climate. The other thing that I see that really helps me is CBD oil. And I know a lot of people have questions on that. I still have questions on that. I mean, there's so much in that world. So many people or so many different companies are making different products. And then you get into, what dosage is right for sleeping, what dosage is, there's all these goals that somebody could have with CBD. Like, are you trying to get inflammation down? Are you trying to reduce anxiety? Are you trying to sleep better?
Yeah.
Stuff. And so it's cool. There's a lot of stuff going into that. So there's a lot of information floating around. It's hard to know what's funded by some of these companies, what's real, what's not real. But I've taken, a few different types of CBD. I've taken capsules, tinctures, CBD gummies from different companies. And I kind of got my go-to one now. Yeah. Product Thorn makes it. It's a CBD plus. It's a full spectrum hemp. So it also has some of the other compounds that play nice with the CBD and act as a nice. And then has some other ingredients that help with the absorption of the CBD, because that's one of the things that make it tough is the bioavailability, how well it's absorbed and utilized by your body when you take it. But I notice when I take my 2 capsules of CBD plus, I have a great HRV reading that next day. And if my next bottle is a couple days late and I haven't taken it, you can usually see that show up in the results.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that just speaks to how personal some of this stuff is, right? But for me, the trouble I had was often sleeping. I worked as a traveling consultant, probably taking about 200 flights a year. So for me, I got into a habit of probably taking melatonin a couple of nights every week. And that really helped with my REM and my slow wave sleep. So I think depending on what your individual goals are you using these products to de-stress, to sleep better? All of that are coupled with the metrics that you can just track, and you can sort of run little tests on yourself, play really nicely to figure out, again, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. So it's awesome.
You can look at maybe a night's sleep that was, adequate. Maybe it wasn't quite as long. Like to me, I try to get, 8 to 8.5 hours of good sleep every night.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll wake up and, it'll be around 7 hours, but it'll be a very good HRV, very good resting heart rate. And I have a great recovery score, and I get through that day and I smoke that day without needing that extra bit of sleep. And sometimes on the flip side, I'll have 9 hours of sleep with a poor readout. And it's just interesting to see that, quality of what you're doing really matters, not just quantity. And to be able to track that quality and be able to quantify it is huge. It's a game changer to me.
Yeah, just one other hack on that for your listeners. Something called sleep consistency is absolutely crucial. I think a great way that people who are maybe having tough work-life balance and trying to think about how can I improve my recovery score? How can I wake up feeling great that day? I can focus on. So sleep consistency is essentially how regularly your sleep-wake times are. And what we've found is there are people who will sleep 6 hours a night and get higher quality sleep than people who are sleeping 8 hours, purely because they are really regimented about kind of the window of time within which they're falling asleep and when they're waking up. So for anyone out there, I would say who's struggling to get those 8 hours, I know it's not always possible. If you can really focus in on maybe finding a 30-minute window of going to bed and waking up, that can really help. There are also things around, obviously, bedtime routine, morning routine, etc., that I can speak to if it's interesting as well.
Yeah. What do you think are some of those things that are built into a nighttime routine, morning routine, that are beneficial to better recovery, better HRV, better readout?
Yeah, so I guess my first tip would be, just before you go to bed, that 30 minutes before, try and think of it as you're preparing for bedtime routine, even if you have other things to do. So within that routine, you can try a few different things. I wear some blue light glasses to try stopping that blue light while I'm still looking at my phone, maybe while I'm working. I'll do some gratitude journaling, and then I fall asleep. There are other folks that have found that taking a quick cold shower works really well for them. You could think about doing some reading in bed, whatever it is. I think just having that 30-minute period where you're doing something which is somewhat regimented really just signals to your body that you're starting to go to sleep. It starts to build that pattern, which then translates over to a really solid night's sleep. The morning, I think people have different priorities. Obviously, I personally will try and do a quick workout while I'm fasted in the morning. I know for other people, they try and take that first 15, 20 minutes, maybe just to do a little bit of meditation, or at the very least try not looking at a screen or a phone, again, just so your body gets used to waking up gradually. But those are kind of the big things that I would suggest, is just first and foremost, just try and build some sort of basic bedtime routine, and try and sleep at a regular time. And you'll be amazed how much better you'll wake up feeling, even if you're getting a fewer number of hours of sleep that night.
Yeah, I know in particular, the gratitude journaling is awesome. And even if I, just kind of, say to myself, a few things that I'm thankful for from that day, that just helps put me in a nice mental state that is relaxing when I lay down. And, you're not sitting in bed with the wheels spinning and, thinking about all sorts of crazy stuff that you can't control. You're grateful for the things that happened to you that day. And I think that's important, and, it provides some good perspective.
Yeah, agreed.
So Saif, the Whoop and HRV does some awesome things. I'm sometimes asked, Jared, what's the goal of wearing that? And to me, it's a multi-part answer. I mean, I want to perform at my best every day, not just physically, but mentally. But more and more, I've been finding myself answering that question with, I want to prevent injury and I want to prevent illness the best I can. I got a family with little kids. We're active. We like to do things, and getting sick, getting injured just doesn't fit into my plan with what I want to do. And I know there's been some studies around HRV and how that kind of shows how worn out the nervous system is and how susceptible you are to getting sick and getting injured.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I think particularly in these kinds of times, health and wellness have kind of emerged even more so as reasons that people are finding value from the Whoop app. So you touched on this before, but one of the three pillars of Whoop is this piece that we call recovery, which is a score you get every morning from 0 to 100 that tells you how ready you are to perform that day. Now, if that recovery is between a 0 and a 33, you would wake up and get a red recovery score. That is being used as a really effective way for people to figure out whether or not they're falling sick. So a red recovery score essentially means that you're run down in some way. That could either be because you crushed a huge workout the night before, maybe you had a few drinks, but if one of those two things weren't the case, it very well means that you're falling sick. So that's been something that many of our users have derived a ton of value from. As you touched on, HRV is really looking into your nervous system. So if you're directing a ton of resources towards fighting off an infection, that is going to show up in your HRV tanking, and that'll then pass on to your recovery score, because HRV is part of that recovery algorithm.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been interesting. I actually had my lowest score ever a couple weeks ago. I was traveling back from a weekend trip with the family in Arizona, and I had a 1% recovery score. Amazing.
That's the lowest I've heard. That's impressive in some ways, worrying in others.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think the most amazing part was I got it back up to like a 93 the following day. But it's interesting. You get that 1%, you're like, man, what factored into this? And you can kind of look at it. I had still been exercising even though we were traveling. We had traveled across multiple time zones, so there's some jet lag there. It was 110 outside, and we were at the pool almost the entire day, the day before that. And then I wasn't sleeping in my own bed. I was sleeping hotter than usual. I had a couple extra drinks when I was at the pool, and all contributes to that poor recovery score. So the nice thing was I get that poor recovery score, and now I've worn this strap so long that I have a plan in place to get that recovery back up and back to where I want it. And so I can mitigate any kind of illness or injury and get back to, crushing it with some green scores and some yellow scores.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that speaks to one of the interesting things about Whoop, which is it's probably at least the only wearable I know in the market that will tell you not to work out. I'm pretty sure when you wake up with that 1% recovery score, your focus for that day is how do I do all the different recovery modality things that I'm typically used to doing to make sure the next day I wake up feeling better. And I think that's a big part of all this as well, is a lot of fitness trackers, people feel like they wear them and they have to just go. I think a big piece is actually understanding when you are too run down, when you are too tired, when maybe you are inclined to be falling sick, and taking it easy that day. That doesn't just mean sitting on the couch eating vegetable chips and you're going to wake up feeling much better the day after, but maybe you get a better night's sleep that day, you roll out a little bit more, you make sure you hydrate and you eat well that day. So I think hopefully that's something as well for folks that have been on the Whoop platform for a while, where they can use recovery obviously to know how to push themselves, but also when to scale it back.
Yeah, I've noticed that just some really low intensity movement has helped a lot when I have poor recovery. Maybe it's like foam rolling or taking a nice leisurely walk, that kind of thing, where I'm not just sitting down, but I'm telling my body that, we're still going to move, we're going to get the blood flow going. And that has helped a lot. And it's cool to see that helps. And one of the other things about Whoop, besides, taking your recovery, looking at your HRV, your resting heart rate, and your sleep, and all these really advanced, cool ways, is it is a great fitness tracker for whatever kind of workout you're doing. It's kind of a one-stop shop, and then it computes that workout score, that strain level that Whoop likes to talk about for and then compares it to your recovery score. So you can kind of try to match the two together.
Yeah, exactly. So we have these three pillars: sleep, recovery, and strain, and they're really working in unison. So as you put it, depending on what your recovery is that day, Whoop will suggest how high a strain you should try and accumulate for that specific day. That strain is going to be accumulated whether you are taking some high stress meetings, if you're doing the laundry, picking the kids up, etc. But it's really going to be pushed when you do that workout as well. So before you start it, you can open up our little strain coach. You can see how much you should be pushing yourself, and you can really start to program your training to how well recovered you are each specific day. And again, that'll vary for each person, right? I'm sure you probably have a lower resting heart rate and probably would have to push yourself harder to hit a certain strain than I would, but that's all factored into the Whoop platform, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's my recommendation of choice if somebody wants to slap something on their wrist that helps them with really whatever goal they're looking for. If they want to decrease stress, increase the recovery, and just boost performance and then measure their performance, you can't beat it. One of the other cool things about it is it's faceless. I mean, it's just a bracelet really. So it's not distracting to the point where you're looking down and getting all these numbers on your wrist. I mean, you have to physically open an app in your phone to look at the data.
Yeah, exactly. We really want it just to be a 24/7 passive monitor. You don't have to take it off your wrist. You have actually a battery pack that just slots on whenever you need to charge it. So the goal is really you slap it on, and then whenever you want to look at your data, you're just opening up a phone app, and you're not being distracted by kind of any notifications that are going to pop up on it.
Awesome. Well, Saif, I appreciate you talking all about Whoop, HRV, and the cool things that this strap does for whoever wears it. I think people have a better understanding on HRV if they had tuned into this show. And yeah, I appreciate you joining me this morning.
Absolutely. Good to be on, Jared. And yeah, we're proud to have you as part of the Whoop family.
All right. You have a good day, Saif.
Thanks, bud.
All right, guys, that wraps up today's episode of the Wealth, Health, and Self Show. It was awesome having Saif on, talking HRV and what it can do for you. It's been amazing for me. I've loved my Whoop strap ever since I put it on. And 4 years later, this thing's still kicking ass. It's awesome. And Saif was nice enough to give me a link to put in the description of this episode. That'll get you $30 off your Whoop membership. So if you're interested in tracking your HRV for all these amazing reasons that we had stated in the show, you know, from optimizing sleep, recovery, stress, being at your best mentally and physically, really just total self-optimization. If you're into that kind of thing, if you want to be your best, man, I suggest a Whoop. I love mine. You'll love yours too. $30 off using that link that I post down below in the episode description. Also, any kind of links from the show that you're looking for, they're down in the description. If you're looking for the best blue blockers, if you're looking for Chili Pad, if you're looking for the Hemp Oil Plus CBD supplement that I spoke about in the show, it's all down there. Same with the melatonin that Saif liked to use while he was traveling and use that to combat jet lag and optimize his scores. So anyway, thanks for joining me today, guys. I appreciate it. If you like this episode, go ahead, click that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to bring you a lot more to optimize your health and wellness. It's been fun, and I'll talk to you later.